Audio Jungle.
I am the Divine Prince, Ty Emmecca, Pan-African Spiritualist, Practitioner, Author, Advisor, Elagoon, Oloye, Hoodoo, Obeya, Bokur. I reside in this beautiful and legendary, historic Treme, New Orleans, Louisiana. So join me as I share food, music, culture, tradition, the rhythms, and the flavor of New Orleans voodoo. Respect the voodoo. And no matter what you do, respect the voodoo. Honor and respect, honor and respect, honor and respect, divine, all blessed greetings and salutations. It is another edition of Revolutionary Hoodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes, powered by, sponsored by, promoted by NOIVD, New Orleans International Voodoo Day. New Orleans International Voodoo Day. We continue to offer you to join us, to support us as we continue our promotion and our planning for our third annual International New Orleans Voodoo Day. The spiritual medicine of voodoo brings healing and relief from the shackles of slavery that bind the master and the slave to the same chain of social division. Inspired by National Voodoo Day in Benin and led by Black community members here locally in New Orleans International Voodoo Day is a day of collective remembrance and spiritual repatriation that is preceded by a symposium and includes a procession of monuments at the sites of enslavement in New Orleans, rituals to account for and seek absolution for the city's and the country's participation in the institution of slavery, homage to those ancestors who suffered through and survived the transatlantic slave trade, and honor and appreciation for the achievements of those who came out of oppression. 2 days for education, creative expression, elevation, cultural exchange, and above all, healing through authentic voodoo traditions handed down through generations. We offer a path to healing from the ongoing ramifications of slavery and racism in the United States. Through an international partnership, New Orleans International Voodoo Day becomes a major annual event in New Orleans, bringing peace, relief, and healing, and connecting New Orleans with Benin, Haiti, and the Pan African diaspora, the major points of the transatlantic slave trade and hubs of voodoo, all well as all nations where African traditional religious practices are still participated in and upheld, and in healing circuit and drawing visitors from around the world. So we offer you to follow our link to our website scrolling at the bottom of the screen at www.voodooday.org. Again, that's www.voodooday.org, voodooday.org for more information and coming updates about our third annual now International New Orleans Voodoo Day. Magic, divination, and obia appear in some form in almost all of Jamaica's near continuous revolts from the time the British took the island in 1655 to the decades following the abolition of slavery in 1834. And although discussions of African diasporic spiritual systems were very much alive in the early modern centuries, the forms that emerged in early colonial Jamaica have received very little scholarly treatment. This study is an attempt to inject culture into the study of African resistance to slavery and colonialism certainly in Jamaica and then throughout the New World, by reconceptualizing three major rebellions as cultural rather than military histories, and by highlighting the role of magic and divination in the genius of these freedom struggles. The first Maroon War, known as the Tackies Revolt, and the 1823 Boxing Day Conspiracy illuminate a clear system of supernatural understanding that came to include a definite link to political resistance and rebellion. These understandings were recognized by enslaved or formerly enslaved Africans, as well as the British in Jamaica and abroad. Some work must be done to delineate what European settlers were responding to as the idea of obeah and how it was related to European ideas about witchcraft and illicit magic from the ideas held among African people. This is especially significant following Tacky's revolt, when the first anti-obeah laws in the Caribbean made obeah an explicitly political action. Europeans were clearly wrapped up in the politics of obeah to a degree that did not concern Africans. However, Africans also used obeah as a crucial form of political resistance. Thus, these three cases allow both British and African ideas about obeah and subsequently hoodoo, conjure, and voodoo throughout the New World to be traced over a century to re-inject a cultural history of African derived spirituality into an otherwise political or politicized narrative. The study does not claim to define magic or any other term absolutely for Jamaica. A very general definition would be offered as background, but this should not be understood as comprehensive. Rather, its more limited ambition is to fill in a hole in the historical reference of how Africans were responsible for the spread and production of culture, again, in the Caribbean, in Central America, in Haiti, and ultimately in the Americas in the modern centuries. A string of recent and excellent studies has focused on the agency of Africans in shaping Jamaica and its freedom struggle. These are mostly political and military histories that describe slavery as a war and tell the stories of African rebels as heroes. Magic, divination, and obeah appear in some form in almost every revolt since the British took control of Jamaica in 1655. Conflicts were almost never divorced from some sort of supernatural aid. However, these histories do not explore how the people of pre modern Jamaica understood magic. And although a military focus is useful for their purposes, this study intends to retell the stories of three major rebellions as cultural histories rather than military histories, and to highlight the role of magic and divination in Jamaica's freedom struggle, and then ultimately in the freedom struggle of Haiti and the New World. John Mbiti wrote in 1969 that, with a few exceptions, African systems of divination have not been carefully studied, though diviners and divination are found in almost every community. Diane Stewart added 36 years later that the same may be said of African diasporic divination, a failure which she connected to the paucity of scholars taking seriously the African derived and African centered spiritual systems of the New World. And yet, even a quick search of divination and related terms like magic and obeah in databases of 18th century Caribbean newspapers yields hundreds of hints Discussions of African diasporic spiritual systems were very much alive among contemporaneous Caribbean writers. This document will focus on Jamaica, Britain's largest Caribbean holding. Over the early modern centuries, Jamaica developed the Caribbean's largest economy, but was also subject to near continuous rebellions from the time the British took the island from the Spanish in 1655 to the abolition or the abolishment of slavery in 1834. Orlando Patterson pointed out that during the more than 180 years of Jamaica's existence as a slave society, hardly a decade went by without a serious, large scale revolt threatening the collapse of the colonial system. And despite this, relatively few monographs have systematically investigated these rebellions. Even few focus on the African cultural agency the rebellions demonstrated, as opposed to their agency as political actions. This would have had a great defining effect on the Haitian Revolution and then subsequently the series of Black codes and Jim Crow laws and other forms of binding that were placed upon us from a cultural perspective here in the Deep South. A major setback to African centered studies has been the Eurocentrism prevalent in the available sources. Many of the studies before Mbuti's statement and many after either dismissed as superficial the magic used by Africans or got caught up in the polemics about the backwardness of magic, criticisms evident also in studies of magic and divination in Europe and elsewhere. Some of these studies assume, following early and influential scholars like Sir James G. Fraser and Bronislaw Malinowski, that magic and divination gave way to religion and then to science. Therefore, magic indicated that a society was culturally backwards or intellectually undeveloped. In that model, when multiple groups co produce a new culture, primarily agency is granted to the group who exercises greater rational mastery over their surroundings, because that group is the one that won out, if you will, over time. One manifestation of this in the Jamaican historiography has been the claim that Africans essentially lost their culture during the Middle Passage, or if African traditional beliefs made it to the New World, then those beliefs were erased as Europeans introduced them to science. Fortunately, these theories have been thoroughly discredited, especially where magic is concerned. Scholars like Stuart Clark and Walter Hangroff have shown that magic is nowhere incompatible with science, and also that it never disappeared in the European mindset. In Jamaica, one cannot claim that African magic competed with British rationality. Both groups equally believed in a rational magic under whatever label it might have been given. And magic was itself a frontier of contestation. In the terrain of magic and divination, Africans were active participants in the creation of Atlantic identities. This study seeks to make this point not through the identification of new data, but by reinvestigation of existing sources for what they reveal about European and African understandings of the unseen world. Examining three uprisings that took place in Jamaica between 1728 and 1824, the long 18th century illuminates a clear system of supernatural understanding linked to political resistance and rebellion that the British labeled, among other things, magic, divination, and obeah. These understandings were recognized by enslaved or formerly enslaved Africans, free people of color, free people of African descent, and the British in Jamaica and abroad. And although Africans and Europeans each held their own views on magic and divination, and truly there are many definitions of magic as there are people who think about it, their product in Jamaica can be studied syn- synchronistically as drawing from both African and European, especially British understandings. There are several rewards for completing this type of study for Jamaica. First, studies of magic in early colonial Jamaica are limited. This project suggests several methodologies for filling in the gap in the history, with a major outcome being the possibility of comparing this system of understanding with that in other colonies, such as here in the United States, as we examine hoodoo and maroon culture practice and its footprint of spirituality, religious practice, and tradition. And we certainly want to bring each and every one of you into the conversation. Greetings and salutations, Ray Alexander. Thank you for continuing to show up with us each night and joining us at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time for this powerful podcast. Greetings, Mambo, Sally and Glassman, Mambo, leader of the Source Ancient and our community, our extended Voodoo community, AYIBOBO, and greetings to you and yours. Greetings, Daniel Neal, active member of our community locally and as well as here on this platform. Greetings and salutations to you and yours, and my godchild, D Goddess. Greetings, beloved, to you and yours. And let's please bring in our co host. We're open the mic for our beloved wild man, my first priest, and my godchild, Joshua Nylan Tanner, and also new initiate of the source. Greetings and salutations, beloved. Then we'll bring in Elder Reggie. On this platform, we identify as Green Soap. And certainly, please, Elder Reggie, um, you didn't mention your temple name. You mentioned you had a service on Sundays, but you didn't mention the temple name. You didn't mention the location. So please be prepared to give us some meat as it relates to what you got going on in your sacred space. And then we will certainly like to welcome our beloved Queen Mother, the Sister Toni Val Martinez. Uh, peace and love. Please
Good
come
day.
on in.
Good day, everybody. Brother Joshua is here. Hope you guys having a good day. Everyone out there that's listening, Elder Reggie and Toni Val. Um, yeah, I was listening to what you were saying earlier, and I kept thinking about you were talking about Jamaica and Jamaica's spiritual system pre the colonization of Jamaica by England and others. Uh, and that spiritual system. And it made me think so much about hoodoo. Like hoodoo was just popping up in my mind. I was like, that's in terms of an American apparent juxtaposition of that experience. I think hoodoo is kind of in that way.
Oh,
You
it
look at
is. And it
sinners. You
also
look at
complements the time period too.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
That contextually is happening at the same time in different locations. Yeah, brother Reggie, Elder Reggie, you
I'm
there?
I'm with you, Joshua. Can you hear me? Oh, I'm on
Yeah,
mute.
come on in.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, give thanks. Give thanks. Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Divine. Thank you, Brother Joshua, Sister Toni. Divine is right. I be talking so fast when I don't write stuff down, I miss something out. But I do have a shrine. I'm an elder of, and it's called Shrine of the White Cloth, and it's located 8084 Morrison Road, New Orleans East. We teach from, I believe, Obeah comes out of the Akan system, which is Ghana. So the teaching, a lot of the teaching that we do at the Shrine of the White Cloth is coming from out of the Ghana African traditional system. I believe that lines up with Obeah. I'm just not sure.
It does. It does.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Obia, I'm sorry, I meant Ghana and Akan culture have a great footprint on not just Obia in Jamaica and the Caribbean, but also on Rasta culture to some degree, and the grassroots, you know, lifestyle that we see in throughout the Caribbean, really.
Okay. See, I'm learning. I didn't know because I hear the word Obeah all the time, but I just like when you say of Ifa, people bring it to the Yoruba system. If you say Voodoo, they bring it to Benin. With Obeah, I just never hear the foundation of it, and that's where I was a little gray at.
It's also a word that's found in Igbo culture as well. So it has a link, a root back to West Africa, but certainly more than one ethnic,
Okay.
particularly in Ghana and in that region.
Okay.
Come on in, Toni Bell.
Hello, everyone out there. Divine Prince, Joshua, Elder Reggie. I hope everyone is having a good night. Um, Not only were the British afraid of Obeah, a lot of the Jamaicans were afraid of it also. And some even, I think, without even getting to the root of what it was, labeled it bad. Labeled it something bad, something evilly magic instead of what it actually was. The British most definitely were afraid of the Africans enslaved they had on the Jamaican island and all the islands really, to where the owners of the plantation didn't even live on the island. They built big plantations and they put overseers there because
Mm-hmm.
they were afraid. They got so many rumors and so many instances of the Africans doing magic on the voyage over to the islands, and they were literally afraid of them. And they made it basically illegal for them to do any practices. And like with Capoeira, Capoeira got away because it was disguised as dancing. And you know how they love to see us dance
Mm-hmm.
without even realizing that it was actually a form of combat,
Mm-hmm.
which was used in the uprising.
Yeah.
They
Right.
put knives between their toes. So when they kicked, they were stabbing. I mean, they had machetes to their legs. They fought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, they fought. So they have a lot of cinema movies out about during that time, especially the uprisings of life on the plantations there, and the cruel overseers they were especially cruel because it wasn't their money, it wasn't their house. They were just working. They were just getting paid. They didn't look at the enslaved as even property because it wasn't theirs. You know, you're gonna take care of something that's yours, but before you take care of something that's somebody else's, like they did in the Americas. In the Americas, they were like cattle and property. So they that was money, but to the overseers in the islands, they was nothing but workers to be used as they wanted them to be used. And it is said that the women especially
Mm.
had a hard time in the islands from the overseers and his gangs that they used to keep the enslaved in control. A lot of them were Irish overseers that came out, and they were particularly already in their culture very aware of magic and what we call hoodoo, and they knew a lot of the signs because they shared the same signs. So they made them have to really go down deep.
Yeah.
They wasn't hiding from the masses, because the masses was in England and Paris and France and anywhere else they wanted to be at. They were afraid of the ones left, the ones left to guard them, who knew a good bit about what they were doing, and that sent them high into the mountains and deep into the jungle regions
Okay.
to practice their art.
That's correct. That's correct. Anybody I know that's from Jamaica, they always tell me, refer to the mountain people as the original people and how they got there. And that's the story. That's the story that they tell. Like they got
And we
there.
tend to hear a lot about Yoruba culture, Yoruba establishing Lukumi and Santeria and Palo and the like, and Candomblé in Brazil. But the Akan and the neighboring Popo people carried a great deal of Obia practice throughout the Caribbean, and not just Jamaica. I think, again, a great deal of this is documented in Jamaica only because of its war implications. Them having to fight the uprisings, fight, the resistance that we were constantly presenting. And then that fed how we were treated in other regions, in other colonies, and certainly how we would have been treated here, particularly when we, again, consider the dates for which we are pulling this information, the references from.
So with that being said, I'd like to just read a quick paragraph from an author by the name of Gert Chasey. It notes, plantation owners and slave dealers had an interest in Christianizing the imported slaves. They thought that aggressive reaction on the part of the enslaved people would not occur. They believed that Christianizing slaves was easier to guide and control in accordance with the slave religion, complaint, subordinate, and forbearing. Forced conversion, however, rarely produced faithful converts. As a result, the African practice became buried beneath the surface, and the new religious fostered upon the slaves became a religious facade of the very African spiritual understanding. With that being said, so even Obeah and all the other systems, the slave master wanted to Christianize them because he believed the magic and some of the supernatural stuff he saw would lessen if he Christianized them. Is that what happened also?
Yes, and they could also use that Bible to control them, because they kept in the passages that said, they took out and made what is called a slave Bible, which had a lot of stuff missing out of it. When the preachers, the black ministers, were starting to be allowed to go and preach to the enslaved, they were given the slave Bible.
And don't
And
forget that.
they kept in slave, obey your master, everything represents to slave and master without the full context of it. They didn't put in that Moses freed his people. They didn't put none of the battles in there. It was mostly for them to subdue, and you'll get your flowers in heaven. You know, no matter what happens to you here on earth, you'll go
Yeah.
to heaven and
Yeah.
everything will be better. And it also kept in the portions that said suffer a witch to die and all that type of stuff to make the enslaved afraid as they were getting colonized and Christianized into the Jesus
Mm-hmm.
mode.
Don't forget that they didn't just select the text; they select the person that was talking to the mouthpiece.
Yes.
I mean,
Tho-
You had to be getting, they had to be granted permission to do that. They couldn't just do it on their own, and they had certain times, and there was a lot of control involved there.
mm,
But then something happened years later. The enslaved actually were being taught on the download to read. And the
mm-hmm.
first thing they got hold of was the real version of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were able to read the real words of the Bible with all the rebellion and uprising, that fueled them even more so to rebel. One, it was a lot of anger that they had been lied to.
Mm.
And then they felt that if God in the Bible helped Moses and Yahshua and everybody else fight these battles and win all these battles in the land of Canaan, that surely he would do the same for them. Let
Yes.
them win these battles.
You're right.
Yes. Okay. So as the slave owners introduced the Bible wind up working against them, because the Bible is supposed to be a book of magic and spells also. And as the enslaved began to read, they seen processes in that Bible that they could use for their own benefit. What comes to my mind is like Nat Turner. They said was studying to be a preacher and then got a revelation for the revolution, for the revolt that he did.
Yeah, he got hold to the slave master's Bible and not the Bible that the slave preachers had been given.
Mm-hmm.
And he got a rude awakening when reading the stuff that was in there. And he too used to suffer from bouts of passing out and clairvoyance also.
Mm.
And we seem to find that in a lot of the people who ran and helped the Underground Railroad, such as Harriet Tubman, and there were others that had this clairvoyance and did the divination and stuff. Now, I don't remember them saying that Turner did the divinations, but I do remember them saying he was clairvoyant and he was thought of to be kind of what we would call today crazy.
I know some people. I know some people like that I live with.
I understand that, John. But in the movie, in the document or the movie I seen on Nat Turner, he was preaching and he had a revelation to free his people. But that was coming directly from the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Well, he was reading the Bible when he had this revelation or vision or whatever for a revolution.
But that's what the Bible represents in a way. It's the Bible, the hero figures Jesus. He's rebellion against everybody. He's coming to bring in
What
the
else?
light.
What
So that
else
is,
would he have said during that time period The ancestors told me.
Yeah, I know.
A God, African God, told me. So whether they believed in the Bible or not, the Bible would have been the most obvious front.
Yeah,
that's correct, Divine.
it
Yeah,
was just the front.
yeah. And so to say that it was a tool supposed to boil down the energy of the African magic, but it worked in reverse with the syncretism of the religious with the African system.
Yeah. And a good example of that is New Orleans Voodoo.
Exactly.
They took the Catholic Bible, which is different from the King James Version and the other Bibles they have out there. They took the Catholic Bible and turned it into what they needed it to be and wanted it to be so that they could freely do their observances while they were being observed.
Yes, and I see that in the system that I was raised in, the New Orleans Spiritual Church. Even though they was using the Bible as the main tool, but there was a lot of practice of what we call supernatural practice still being interwoven with the Bible being the main teaching instrument. So yeah, so the syncretism is real, and it just was used in a lot of different methods.
Well, the Bible is a magical book. It's a lot of stuff going on in there, like the burning bush that was not on fire, like the sticks that turned to snakes. It's a lot of magical stuff in the book. If you look and know the pillars of fire that held back the Egyptians when Moses' people had to cross the Red Sea opening up when he raised his arms. He had this staff that was given to him that was obviously a magical staff.
Yes.
So it's a lot of magic in there that people aren't realizing is very magical.
Right. Well, we'll continue the story on magic. Excuse me, not sorry to cut you off. Here's our time. We're going to close out, and we'll continue the practice of magic in African ATRs, in the Christian Bible, in Catholicism, and magic in general. It's a good topic. It's a good subject that we could dive into. And that's what we want to do with the New Orleans International Voodoo Day conglomerate group. We are trying to build and bring back a foundation and base to all the systems that's around us and give it some type of structure as we move forward. We give thanks and honor to Divine for hosting the show, Sister Toni in your wisdom, Brother Joshua in your great knowledge, also in our collective audience that comes up in the chat, who always present us with good thoughts, trains of thoughts, things to think about to go even deeper. But sometimes I wish they would chime in also. With that, I would say, Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Good night, everyone. Great show.
Good night, everyone. Have a great evening.
Good night, Odabo.
Allow me to show you something.
They say I'm crazy and that might be true. I got this right in my DNA, yet I'm coming for you. It's time we turn the tables, flip these motherfuckers on you. I wanna see you hanging from trees. It's time you pay for your dirt and your showtime. You created the monster, you created the beast. Now all this savagery you just gon' reap. I'm coming home, daddy, to the plantation, and I'm taking the lives of everybody, including the children, on some Nat Turner away. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. I met my girl Harriet at the gate. If you wanna know how she doing, yeah, she's straight. But she had one question: when we gon' get up? All that talking tough, yeah, we don't walk it tough. She got it locked and loaded, got that piece up on her side. She looked me in my eyes and said, "Meet you ready to ride?" Moving forward, you gotta use both eyes. Watch your front and watch your back. Keep your hands up on your gas. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. He sit at the table, but he don't order no bacon. He greet me in those words, assalamu alaikum. Got them glasses on his face and them waves in his head. He go by the name of Detroit Red. He looks me in my eye and says, "You only get one try. Know that your biggest opposition will come from the inside." I know you wanna love them all, but don't even try, because they'll smile up in your face while plotting your demise. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down. Do you hear that sound? It's about to go down. Unleash the beast, we about to tear this motherfucker down.